Most riders still expect a cheaper AD Vi to be the one with a weak engine, a thin spec sheet, and corners cut. In places you only notice after a few months of ownership. Then the CFMOTO 800MT shows up next to heavy hitters, like the KTM 790 Adventure, the Suzuki V-Strom 800, and the Triumph Tiger 900, and suddenly the whole conversation shifts. This bike isn't perfect, and it isn't pretending to be some kind of magic trick. But once you line up the power, the features, and that price tag, it gets really hard to dismiss. We are going to jump into the 10 reasons this machine is shaking up the middleweight ADV class, especially since one big concern still hangs over it, and it has nothing to do with the engine. Part 1. Power, Platform, and Road Manners. Kicking off the list at number 10, the engine changes what people think they know about this bike. The 800MT runs a 799 cubic centimeter parallel twin tied closely to the KTM 790 platform. So this isn't some throwaway budget motor built to pad a spec sheet. That matters on the road and in the garage. Owners and independent shops keep bringing up the same practical upside. When a CFMOTO dealer isn't close, some routine service items like filters cross over with KTM-sourced parts, which gives riders a backup plan instead of waiting on one brand-specific box. That shared DNA gives the 800MT real credibility right away. Does that KTM connection make you trust the bike more, or do you still need a few more years of proof? Let me know in the comments. Now, look at the numbers. Depending on market and trim, the 800MT lands around the mid-90 horsepower range, which keeps it right in the middle of this class. It doesn't give away much to the V-Strom 800, Tiger 900, Transalp, or BMW F850GS, where most people ride. On the highway with luggage and on long travel days, it feels like a full-size ADV, not a cheaper stand-in. You feel that most when the road gets tight and slow, traffic stacks up in front of you. Say you're stuck behind a caravan on a mountain pass, you spot a clean gap, roll the throttle on, and the bike drives past without that frantic double downshift and big burst of revs that cheaper twins often need. That's the kind of small win riders remember. Moving on to number 9. The way this bike delivers torque matters more than the peak horsepower number. Riders who tour don't want to wring a bike out just to pass a truck or pull out of a corner with luggage on the back. The 800MT's twin pulls cleanly through the mid-range, so you roll the throttle on, and it answers without drama. Think about merging onto a fast interstate with hard bags packed and camping gear strapped on the back. The traffic is moving, the gap is short, and the bike still pulls in with enough shove that you don't feel like you're asking for a favor. That matters more than chasing the last bit of top end. Number 8 is the chassis and suspension package, because a good engine only gets you so far if the bike feels loose once you're moving. Review after review lands in the same place. The 800MT feels more settled than people expect for the money. It uses proper hardware, including upside-down forks, and on pavement, it tracks like a touring bike should. In sweepers, it stays composed, and on rougher sections, it doesn't kick back like a stripped-down bargain machine. A KTM may still feel sharper when the pace climbs, but the CFMOTO feels planted and easy to trust. At number 7, the electronics package keeps pushing the value story. This is where other brands start splitting things into trims and option packs. Then the final bill grows fast. The 800MT stays strong here with ride modes, cruise control, a full-color TFT display, and touring extras that riders actually use. Cruise control alone changes long highway runs, especially when the first 2 hours of your day are interstate before the fun roads even start. Part 2. Build quality, equipment, and daily use. Coming in at number 6, the build quality is probably the biggest shock once you look past the badge on the tank. Older Chinese motorcycles basically trained us to expect rough metal, flimsy buttons, and paint that looked like it might flake off if you stared at it too hard. The 800MT pushes back against that reputation immediately, and reviewers keep pointing out how well the panels line up and how solid the controls feel under your fingers. It might not have that final layer of showroom polish you get with a BMW or a Triumph, but the gap is nowhere near as wide as people think before they see it in person. When you actually sit on one and realize nothing feels cheap or loose, the whole conversation about whether to buy it changes very quickly. Number 5 is the standard equipment. And this is where CFMOTO starts putting some serious pressure on the rest of the class. Most middleweight adventure bikes look like a great deal at their base price. But then you start adding the stuff you actually need, and that out-the-door number climbs fast. With the 800MT, a lot of the gear touring riders want is already there from the factory or included on trims that still cost way less than the competition. Depending on where you live, you are looking at handguards, a skid plate, crash bars, a center stand, and even heated grips and a heated seat. This really matters because most riders over 40 aren't looking for a project bike they have to finish building themselves. They want to buy the bike, throw their bags on it, and head out for the weekend without spending another $3,000 on accessories. At number 4, we have to talk about comfort, because this is where the bike makes the most sense for riders who have done some real miles. A bike can look great and feel fast, but if it beats you up by lunch, you won't keep loving it. The riding position on the 800MT is upright and relaxed, so your back stays straight and your knees aren't folded up all day. Wind protection is another strong point, and this is where the difference shows up on a real ride. Picture an 8-hour day with a couple hundred highway miles before the mountain roads even start. On a sharper rival like the KTM, the seat can start to feel like a plank by the time you stop for fuel, and the extra wind with that more aggressive posture keeps loading your wrists and neck hour after hour. The 800MT feels more like a sofa by comparison, not soft and sloppy, but broad, supportive, and easy to stay on. So when the road finally gets good, you still want to ride instead of just get off. On the 800MT, riders keep saying they step off feeling like they could still do another hour, and that's exactly what a travel bike should do. Number 3 is the fuel range and how easy this thing is to live with every day, which often gets buried under off-road talk. Most middleweight adventure bikes spend most of their lives on pavement or light gravel, and that is where the 800MT fits best. The tank gives you real travel range, so you spend less time hunting for gas and more time riding. Day to day, the road-biased setup also makes the bike feel practical instead of like a tall dirt bike with turn signals. A KTM might feel sharper, and a BMW may carry more badge appeal, but the CFMOTO gets very close where daily riding actually happens. Part 3. Value, reliability, and the one thing holding it back. At number 2, the price is where the 800MT stops being just an interesting alternative and starts becoming a real problem for the big brands. When you compare it to a KTM, a Triumph, or a Honda, the CFMOTO usually costs thousands less while offering more features right out of the box. That price difference isn't just a number on a spreadsheet, because that extra money stays in your pocket for things like riding gear, hotel stays, and sets of tires for your next big trip. A lot of people say they want a premium badge on their bike, but once they do the math, they realize that badge is costing them a lot of actual riding time. So let me ask you this. If you had an extra $3,000, would you spend it on a famous logo on the tank or on a month-long trip with the 800MT? Let me know in the comments. This bike proves you don't have to spend a fortune just to get a capable machine that can handle a cross-country tour. That leads us to number 1, which is reliability. And this is the topic that usually makes or breaks the argument for buying a Chinese bike. To be fair, the 800MT does not have the 30-year track record of something like a Suzuki V-Strom, and it would be silly to pretend it has the same history as the Japanese brands. However, when you look at the actual owner reports and the mechanical bones of the bike, it looks like a much safer bet than the old stereotypes would suggest. As mentioned earlier, that KTM-based engine helps, and the feedback from early owners has been surprisingly positive so far. Of course, that doesn't mean every single worry has gone away, especially since a newer brand has to work twice as hard to earn a rider's trust. Japanese bikes still hold the crown for long-term proof, and many people still feel more comfortable seeing a BMW or Triumph logo in their garage. CFMOTO hasn't fully closed that gap in reputation yet, but they have successfully moved the needle from being a cheap unknown to being a serious contender. Most riders aren't looking for a perfect machine, but they do need enough confidence to know the bike will start every morning and get them home at the end of the trip. So, the one thing still holding the 800MT back isn't the power or the comfort, but rather the size of the dealer network. Depending on where you live, finding a shop that stocks parts or knows how to service these bikes can still be a bit of a challenge compared to the established brands. At the same time, the KTM-based architecture and straightforward parallel twin layout do give this bike one practical advantage on a long trip. If you end up in some small town with no CFMOTO sign anywhere, the kind of old-school mechanic who has spent years working on twins and basic adventure bikes can likely handle routine service or simple repairs without needing to treat the bike like a spaceship. That doesn't erase the dealer gap, but it does give you a fallback plan, and that matters when you're far from home and just need the trip to keep moving. The used market is also smaller, which makes it harder to guess what the bike will be worth in 3 years, and that is a real factor in the total cost of ownership. If you like to tour far away from big cities, knowing there is a dealer in every town gives you a peace of mind that is hard to put a price on. But if CFMOTO keeps building out their support system and proving these bikes can handle high mileage, the rest of the adventure world is going to get very nervous. The 800MT is quickly moving from being a smart bargain to being the bike that shows everyone just how much extra they've been paying for a famous name. Once enough riders realize they can get the same experience for a lot less money, the market is going to shift in a big way, and the established brands will have to find a way to justify their higher prices. In conclusion, the CFMOTO 800MT really shakes things up in this category because it gives you the features riders actually care about, like solid power and a full touring setup, without that painful premium price tag. If you enjoyed this breakdown, you should check out our next middleweight ADV comparison and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any new videos. I want to hear from you in the comments, so tell me which one you would honestly pick between the KTM V-Strom Tiger BMW Transalp or this 800MT.